Hey babes, my name is Nadia Sayre, and welcome to The Rebels, Chapter 4. We got woken up 2 nights ago by what sounded like thunder, Walter Blake began quietly, holding his wife's hand tightly. Soldiers burst into our homes and held us all under guard. It wasn't until yesterday we were told what was happening. Some colonel informed us that they were the North Korean Liberation Army, and they had freed us from our corrupt government. The North Koreans had bombed certain high target areas, places with military or political significance. Portland had been decimated, he said, and people had been ordered to remain in their homes. Those who disobeyed were disappeared. We heard a disturbance down here, he told Sonya apologetically. Your mom? Son nodded. She was really laying into them, sarcastic as hell, pointing out every flaw in their so-called liberation. Let's just say they didn't like it. The last we saw, your family was being loaded into a truck. I don't know where they were taken. I'm sorry. Sonya nodded, clenching her fists and staring resolutely ahead. And is this everywhere? I asked. The entire valley, we believe. Don't know for sure about Eastern Oregon, or anything about the rest of the country, though. Maybe it's just hopeful thinking. So you mean to tell me I don't have time to freak out? He shook his head. Rude. I sat back in my chair and scrubbed my hands over my face. On the one hand, I was terrified. My dad and brother lived in Molalla, roughly an hour's drive away. On the other, I'd been terrified for a few hours now, and it was beginning to lose its bite. I wondered when I'd be able to make it home to find Papa and Sean. Looking around the table, I realized that it wasn't when, it was if. The reason people didn't try to escape is that they've done something that's shut down all technology. Phones, cars, even lights. None of it is working. That's not possible, Sonya objected. Hope's truck is working fine. My truck is ancient, I said dryly. These new ones all primarily use computers to run. I'm one of 4 people in the area who didn't turn in my truck when the government offered that deal. Determined to prove Walter wrong, Sonya wandered around, trying out everything. Lights, TV, the microwave. She had to say, "Hey, Mia," 3 times before she gave in and tried things manually. I absently pulled my tiny, ancient flashlight out of my pocket and flicked it on. Nothing. How disappointing. This sounded like some kind of an electromagnetic pulse. Shit. I vaguely remembered Will going on about EMPs and their effects on technology. I wondered if it was permanent. Why didn't you? Jolly asked suddenly. Turn in your car, I mean. I'd smiled mirthlessly. Because I'd just finished revamping the entire engine. I designed her to get 200 miles to the gallon. I was hoping to patent my design. Then, when the initiative began, I wasn't just going to throw away all my hard work. Walter raised his eyebrows, impressed. But we didn't have time for my truck stories, so he continued with the tale. There'd been a brief attempt at a revolt that was ruthlessly put down in less than an hour. My aunt hadn't been the only one vocal about what happened, and every one of them was loaded onto a truck. All day today and last night, trucks have been rolling through, bringing in folks living in rural areas. Looks like they might be heading for Salem. They have been driving through town today, Keone interjected, on a loudspeaker, telling us the entire West Coast was freed from tyranny, and that it was only a matter of time before the rest of the country followed suit. Well, fuck, I said. Not only my dad and brother, but I have an uncle and cousins down in the San Joaquin Valley in California. Beg pardon, I addressed Keone and the kids. Keone waved it off. Unfortunately, It's appropriate to the situation, and the kids have been exposed to worse in the last couple days. I think, with your family missing, we can give you a pass." She gave us a weak smile, teeth flashing white against her skin. I looked around the table. The kids looked frightened, and the parents both scared and determined all at once. Sonya looked like somebody had hit her with a shovel, and I thought a good breeze could knock me off my chair. Alex was focused on the story, pulled briefly out of her grief. "So, what are you going to do next?" I asked. We really don't know what we can do, really." Walter cleared his throat nervously. "Stay put?" "Bugger that." I borrowed another phrase from Mercy, my Australian cousin. "Damned if I'll sit still and let them bastards push me around." "How will you stop them?" "Don't know if I can stop them," I replied. "But as of this moment, they don't know anything about me or Son, and I don't intend to stick around and let them find us." I wasn't really sure where the words were coming from. These ideas were all half thought out, my brain pretty much running without a filter again. But I let it keep going. I wanted to see where I was going with all this. "I've been reading." "She does that a lot," Sonya mumbled. I glared at her and continued. "Reading about military bunkers up in the hills. It's only a rumor, see? But Son's brothers like to go four-wheeling, and they've told us about areas that are fenced and gated with armed guards. I think we should head there. They've told us basically how to find it." I sent Son a questioning look, and she nodded. The boys had spent a fair bit of time up there, trying to see if they could find another route into the claimed territory. They couldn't. They'd also spent a lot of time describing where they'd gone. "Maybe we'll get lucky and find somebody up there. Find a place to stay until this," and here I indicated the world, "is fixed. We should be able to fit everyone in the back of my truck. It'll be wet, but preferable to staying here." I looked around the table. "You'll gamble everything on a hunch and a hope?" Keone protested half-heartedly. I shrugged. "Best I've got right now," I admitted. "Unless somebody else has a genius idea." Silence. Shit. I hated it when my half-assed ideas were the best we had. Like that time we went to Abaquoh Falls because we were bored. That was stupid. Let's just say boogie boards and 30-foot drops don't mix. Walter took a deep breath and reached over to take his wife's hand. "We want you to take the kids," he said tightly. "But Keone and I aren't going." The kids immediately began protesting, but Walter raised his free hand, silencing them. "It's better for you two to get out of here. You know it is." "But we can't." He looked at his wife and gripped her hand tighter as he continued. "Her parents are elderly and in no condition to go running around, and we can't just abandon them. They're right here in town, so we can easily keep an eye on them. There's no telling what will happen to the elderly with these animals." "But, Dad..." Acelia's lips trembled and her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, honey." Walter stood and pulled his daughter into a hug. Keone and Jali joined in, turning it into a family hug. Sonya and I looked away awkwardly. Walter looked over at us. "We've seen some young women being taken away. It's only been 2 days, but rumors are already flying. Neighbors talking over fences, and it sounds like soldiers are having private parties. Celebrations." His lips tightened with disgust. "I won't risk my daughter with something like that." Quite frankly, I could see his worry. Acelia was distinctive. Other types of beauty, such as I suspected Alex of having, could blend into a crowd. Alex had blonde hair, green eyes, and full lips. I don't know about the rest of her features, as they were still bruised and swollen, but I could guess that when the swelling went down, she'd be beautiful. It's weird to think of beauty as being common, but perhaps not unusual for our region is the best way to describe it. Acelia, on the other hand, was exotic. Her mother was incredibly dark-skinned, African by her accent, with amazing bone structure. Acilia had inherited her mother's features, and her skin was a combination of both parents. Pair that with kinky dark hair, blonde streaks, and lovely, canted blue eyes, and the girl would be immediately visible in a crowd. All it would take is one glimpse for a man to notice her. Make that an unscrupulous man who thought he had rights to a woman's body, and that woman is in serious trouble. "They ain't won yet," Sonya growled. "Nope," I agreed. "But if we want to make sure they don't get comfortable and don't catch us, we'd better get the hell out of here while it's raining and getting dark." I paused for a moment, thinking. They were all watching me intently, even the parents. I swallowed. "Son, get Dana's gear together. Both packs." Me, Son, Dana, and Tony were in search and rescue, and one thing every member was required to have were 2 packs, one for single-day rescues, just the basics, and one for 2 days. The thing is, if you have enough gear for a couple days, you've got enough for a year. As long as you didn't run out of food. Sonya nodded. "What about our house?" "I'll go there and grab Tony's gear. We should have enough to keep us all dry." "Dry-ish," I amended, listening to the downpour outside. "Maybe we'll get lucky and Tony will be there." Alex stood up unexpectedly. "Do you have boots that would fit me?" she asked Son. She was puffy and bruised, and tears still filled her eyes, but she was resolute. "I don't know how well skaters will work in the hills." Sonya blew out a breath as she stood up from the table. "We're bound to have something." She led the way downstairs. "What size are you?" I moved to the window, checking that the coast was clear. "Right. I'll head to our place. I shouldn't be more than half an hour." I looked at the Blakes. "Pack a few basics and say your goodbyes while I'm gone. If we're to have any chance, we'll need to leave as soon as possible. Don't be late." As I headed down the short flight of stairs to the front door, I could hear Sonya and Alex downstairs, packing and getting things together. Just before I shut the door, I heard Acilia saying, "Dad, I don't want to go with them. That Hope, she's scary." "Good. I hope she scares them, too." I closed the door before I heard the rest of what her father said. Since no one was around to see, I didn't bother hiding my grin. I never minded being thought of as scary. Pulled my beanie out of my pocket and tugged it on. I checked the truck as I passed it, making sure that the tarp was still in place, then headed down the drive. As I jogged along the rain-slicked sidewalks, water formed small streams in the gutters and sluiced over the concrete. Droplets collected on my jacket, running off and soaking my pants. I thought about my family, wondering, scared. Well, I wasn't too worried about Grace. She'd just gotten married and was off on her honeymoon. They'd gone to Canada. Papa and Sean, I shied away from that. Too much thinking about them would just incapacitate me. Peter was in the army, posted God knows where, so while he was likely in danger, at least he wasn't in this danger. Uncle Dave, my dad's brother, lived just outside of Fresno, California. I wondered if they were okay, especially Faith. She was closest to me in age, and me, her, and Mercy formed what our parents called the Diabolical Trio, and we called the Three Musketeers whenever we were together. Faith and Mercy had been up for the wedding. Then Mercy had gone back south with them. I hoped that this hell was limited to just us, that's for sure. Mercy, my Australian cousin, should have flown out a few hours before the attack started from Los Angeles, so I chalked her up as safe. Good thing she left Oregon when she did. While I'd been thinking, I'd puffed and panted my way up Robinson and onto Church Street. We were just around the corner from Robinson in a tiny single-story house. The once bright paint was peeling, and the overall effect could be best described as run down. It had 3 bedrooms and was listed as cozy. This translated into so damn small a mouse would have trouble turning around in it. Despite desperate times, desperate measures and all. A twinge of nostalgia lanced through me as I walked up to the door. It may be cramped, dingy, and the house equivalent of a rust bucket, but it was our home. Opening the door, I called for Tony, but I wasn't surprised when there was no answer. Hopefully, she and Steve were safe. Great. Another family member whose location was unknown. I hustled through the house, careless of the water I tracked in, and dug through Tony's stuff. I thanked my lucky stars that her larger pack was mostly full. Trying to find anything in Tony's room is like finding a needle in a stack of needles. I waded through the clothes tossed carelessly around the room, covering every flat surface, including the floor, until I was sure I had everything. I took a quick trip through Sonya's Spartan room to grab more socks and clothes. Can't ever have too many socks. Before running into my own room. As far as tidiness was concerned, I lived a happy mix between Sonya and Tony. With dirty clothes in a small pile in the corner, my smaller pack on top of the bookshelf, and a few random books and picture frames scattered around. Yanking my smaller pack off the top shelf, I loaded it at high speed. Both Sonya and Tony were too fat for anybody else to borrow their clothes, and I had no idea if the kids had anything sturdy enough to survive rough living. Sure, Dana had plenty of clothes, but we could always use more. I rifled through my shelves. More socks, moccasins might come in handy, extra bottle of methylated spirits, big first aid kit. And suddenly, I was nearly done. I wished I had time to change into dry clothes, but anything I put on would be wet in a couple minutes anyway. I shrugged. As long as my underwear stayed dry, I wasn't doing too badly. Passing my bookshelf in the living room, I paused a moment. I had a smidge of more space left in the pack, and I pored over the shelves, looking. I threw in 3 slim volumes about native herbs and their uses. I looked in the pack. I could fit 1 more. I vacillated between 2 before finally settling on 1. Hope it's useful, I mumbled, stuffing it into the pack and buckling it shut. Covering both packs in their rain tarps took barely a moment, though I did have a bad thought about the brightly colored fabric. I chewed my lip, then shrugged. Dry was important right now, and visibility outside was shit. It looked more like full dark than late afternoon in September. I grimaced, hoping for the best. I stuck my head out the door to check, but didn't see or hear anything. I scrunched my eyes up, hesitating. My heart thundered. I bit my lip, trying to nerve myself up. Fuck it, I mumbled, slinging the packs on front and back and waddling into the rain. I huffed and groaned under the weight, thankful that the way back was all downhill. I'd never survive going up. My legs were trembling by the time I made it back to Aunt Rose's and found that my little pickup had been reloaded. The tarp now covered a small mound. Sonya came up with a look of relief and helped me out of the packs. We shoved them behind the bucket seats in the cab on top of the packs we'd taken on our trip 3 days and a million years ago. Then she lifted the tarp, showing me what had changed under it. All the cans we'd stolen were blocked towards the rear of the bed by a board. The narrow space between box and board had blankets mounded in there, a couple bags, and Cinder, who woofed softly at his person. Wow, I never would have thought of this, I said, impressed by what they'd done and how quickly. Yeah, Sonya said wryly. Just for fun I tried the other cars, but none of them worked. Not even a cough. Who'd have thought you were the smart one not taking advantage of the government? As for the back, the board was Walter, the blankets Keone, to keep the kids comfy in the back. Oh, and Walter gave us a Glock and ammo. What? I choked, disbelieving. Are you shitting me? He's got a gun and ammunition? I exhaled, blowing water off my nose. Who would have thought a middle-aged guy who looked like your classic high school teacher had it in him? That is one brave bastard. Government would crucify him if they had ever found out. I blew out a long breath. Enough time marveling at the size of Walter's balls. Time to think about how to get out of here. We needed somebody to run interference like I did on the way here. I looked at Son. Way too out of shape to make the 3 or so miles of suburban streets to get out of town. Alex could barely walk, and the kids were... kids. I groaned. God damn it! I scrubbed my hands over my face for what felt like the millionth time, using the rain to wash off the last traces of blood and dirt. You just realized you're running again, didn't you? Sonya grinned, her face still too pale. Fuck off, I said sourly. You and your damn nearsightedness and glasses. I guess this is the moment I get to keep the New Year's resolution I never made to get healthy in a hurry. You do realize you're joining me on my health kick, you know? Hell no! She leaned back from me as if I carried a deadly disease. I smirked. Dunno how you're gonna avoid it. You packed the truck. We don't have any junk food. We'll be hunting and gathering, all that fun shit. It almost made me feel better, seeing the abject horror on her face at the thought of no more chips and soda. Almost. Alex walked stiffly over, carrying Obelix, and eased herself into the passenger seat. I took 2 steps back to see the front door and the Blakes standing just inside, huddled together. Excuse me. I looked at Son, eyebrows raised, but she gave me a death stare, still pissed off at the thought of running. And I sighed. The walk to the door to get them moving stretched into a mile. I'm sorry, guys, I said when I got there, but we have to go. Somebody'll find all the bodies we left at Safeway soon, if they haven't already, and they'll start looking around. If there's to be any chance for us, we have to go now. Acelia let out a tiny wail and clung to her mother tighter. A tear tracked down Keone's cheek as she and Walter urged the kids towards the truck. More tears fell, all washed away by the rain. Once the kids were loaded in the back, tucked in, cuddled around Cinder, Walter began fastening the tarp. They cried. It broke my heart. Walter's shoulders trembled, but his face didn't change until he fastened the last corner. Then he turned away and pressed his forehead against the house, shoulders shaking with sobs, uncaring who saw him now. Keone seized my hand, gripping it hard. Promise me you'll keep them safe. I flailed my free hand around wildly, indicating the situation in the world at large. I hated people asking for promises, especially ones in situations that I can't control. I don't care. Promise me. Best I can give you is an I'll do the best I can. Keone scowled. I jumped in before she could get going. I get that sending your kids away with complete strangers is insane in normal circumstances, and you've got to be having all kinds of doubts. But please, I was practically begging, please don't make me give a promise I can't keep. I don't even know if we'll make it out of town. Keone. Walter roused himself from his grief and laid a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. Babe, if we send them away, they have a chance. If we keep them here... He shrugged helplessly, eyes red from weeping but never wavering from her face. We have to give them every chance, don't we? Defeated, she nodded and finally released my hand. Go get your parents, I said quietly to them. Bring them to your house or go stay with them. Go now while it's still raining. I checked that all was clear on the road and circled a hand in the air. The truck started smoothly, the engine settling into a quiet rumble as Sonya eased her out onto the road. I did look back, but the rain poured, a solid wall so thick that I only imagined seeing the Blakes with their arms around each other, watching us leave. Water gushed down the roads to the storm drains, and every footfall landed in an inch of water, splashing the hems of my pants as I peered around the corner. Not that a few extra drops made any difference now. As soon as I gave the all clear, Son pulled up next to me, and I hopped onto that greatest of inventions, the running board. I'd never used them, since my truck is built so low that people sit down into it, And I have no idea why the previous owner had even put the damn things on. The only reason the running boards were still there is because I'd had no time to remove them, but they were proving their weight in gold. When we were 20 feet down the road, lights flashed through the trees, and we got ready to stop. I nearly lost my grip with relief when the trucks never slowed, continuing straight. Near the end of Mill Street, I hopped off the boards and jogged to the end, checking the way. I waved them across, then ran to join them. My right knee began to ache, and I had a vague memory of banging it into a refrigerated display unit at the grocery store. I tried to keep most of my weight on my left leg as we followed the third until it became a gravel track. We zigzagged through the tiny streets with minute houses and postage stamp yards until we had no choice but to emerge briefly onto water. The first left we came to, Bodacious Drive, took us to a newer section of streets and the possibility of escaping into the hills. We'd only gotten 30 feet down Bodacious when I saw lights shining ahead of us, and I quickly thumped the roof of the cab, signaling Sonya to pull over. Sonya pulled into an empty space in a driveway, killing the engine. I dropped under a bush where I could watch the road. I sniggered at how quickly hiding from the man had become. Routine. I watched the Hummer-style truck. These guys seriously had a hard-on for Hummers. Compensating, maybe? Drive slowly down the lane, and then I frowned. Why weren't they using spotlights? I could plainly see that the headlights worked just fine. Instead, they used some antiquated method of flares in front of shiny backgrounds, similar to what lighthouses used back in the day. I guess it worked okay, but flares didn't offer a clear picture. Then again, I thought as I watched their red tail lights disappearing towards the town center, maybe that's why they missed our truck. Meh, I shrugged, dismissing the mystery of the lights, and went to check on my people. Sonya rolled down the window as I approached. "Everything okay?" she asked, worry tinging her voice. "Fine, just checking. To see if you're still nice and dry." I couldn't keep the sourness out as I felt the warm air billowing from the crack in the window. Sonya, that bitch, didn't even try to smother her laugh, letting it roll out. "Oh, we're fine. How about you? Washing your clothes while you still wear them?" I flipped her off. "Even my underwear." Son laughed again. Do you need a break?" Alex leaned forward, holding the sleeping puppy. I shook my head. She was bruised, beaten, and could barely walk, had buried her only child, and yet offered to take a turn on the running boards. What a champ. "I'll be fine. Eventually. No point someone else getting their nether regions chafed by wet pants." I moved back slightly to talk to the tarp. "How are you kids doing?" "We're fine." I could barely hear Acilia over the rain drumming on the tarp. "Are we out of town yet?" "Not yet, kiddo. Sorry." I felt a pang for these kids, being whisked away from their family by complete strangers. "We've still got a ways to go. Just keep your heads down. Try to take a nap. Keep the dog calm." "He's sleeping." She sounded plaintive and a bit jealous about the old dog's ability to fall asleep at a moment's notice. I moved back to Son and stepped onto the running board again. "Time to go." Since we'd left Aunt Rose's, the final vestiges of light left the air, and an almost pitch dark settled over the suburb. Without lights or center lines, the only way to follow the road was to follow the lighter gray of the sidewalks. We knew we finally hit the road out of Silverton when the yellow center line appeared, and I breathed a sigh of relief. The low growling of the truck was barely audible over the water as it burbled down the road. The truck lurched suddenly, flinging me from my precarious perch, and I hit the ground hard, then shrieked when the ground dropped away. "Fuck!" I groaned when I eventually stopped. I tried rolling over and pushing myself up. My left hand slipped in a patch of mud, sending me face first into a clump of grass. "Fuck my I screamed into it. Footsteps splashed across the road and squelched down to where I lay. "Oh my God! Are you all right?" Sonya cried, panicking. She tried to help me up, stopped, started, and ended up sitting down abruptly. If anything told me we were well and truly fucked, that would be it. Normally, Sonya is the most unflappable person I know. A spill like I'd just had would normally have sent her into fits of laughter, after which she'd take photos before finally checking to see if I was okay. Then she'd laugh again. This panic was so much worse because it was completely foreign to her character. Behind her, I could hear the kids crying in fear, asking what was happening. "I'm fine!" I spat grass and mud out. "I'm fine. Just help me up, all right?" I gripped her leg. Sonya grabbed my hand and hauled me to my feet. My right knee immediately informed me that it'd been whacked twice today, and I'd pay for it tomorrow. I flexed my leg back and forth, trying to work the joint, feeling a point just above the kneecap. I bent my leg again, musing. I guessed a rock right in the top of my knee. Oh yeah, that's gonna feel good tomorrow. "How are you?" Sonya asked anxiously. "Wet. Grumpy. Hit my knee on something. Again." I walked up the hill by stabbing my toes into the soil, gouging temporary stairs into it. Every time I pushed up on my right leg, all the muscles around the impact complained. "I'm okay," I called to the truck. Sonya, reassured by my irritability, it's easier not panic when you're the one pissed off, took off past me, jogging to the truck to calm everyone down. Alex, I saw, had made it out of the cab and spoken to the kids, calming them. When Son got there, she filled them in on what had happened. I could just make out a lighter patch in the asphalt a little ways behind the truck. When I tested it, I found it to be a nasty little pothole. I pinched the bridge of my nose, eyes closed, and head tilted down to protect my face from the rain. Of course it's a friggin' pothole. Welcome to Oregon. I stumped back to the others, grumbling the whole way. "Pothole, fucking cheapskate bastards can't even maintain the damn roads, son of a bitching pothole." Sonya grinned weakly when she heard me, then Alex hissed. I looked, barely able to see her head cocked, listening. "Something's big in front of us." She whispered. "Driveway, 20 feet up, on the left," I shouted to Sonya. "Go, go, go! I'll hide here." Sonya actually obeyed, sliding into the driver's seat and going before Alex even got her door shut. I ran to the ditch I'd just climbed out of and went down it in a baseball slide, twisting at the bottom so I lay on my belly, ready to peek over the edge. The earth trembled, then, when the lights came into view, my breath caught. This was more like a motorcade, with 2 Hummers in the lead, both with mounted machine guns. I rubbed my face in mud to hide the paleness of my skin and went back to peering through the grass. A short ways behind the Hummers loomed a large truck, a transport of some kind. I hardly dared to breathe as I waited for them to see an inconsistency to the grass and stop. As the transport passed, I could make out its cargo by the light of the next vehicle in the train. The truck was filled to bursting with people. Men, women, children, all of them huddled together, cold and miserable, pale with fear. After that transport, another one rolled past. Same cargo. People. Then another, and another. 4 transports full of people. I lay there, shuddering with cold or anger, I don't know which. It was probably fear. After the last transport, another Hummer followed. After it passed, I lay there, night blind, my heart trying to pound through my chest. A minute later, I felt it. It started as a bone-deep rattle that upgraded to the sensation of sitting on top of a washing machine when it's in the spin cycle. Cautiously, I poked my head up, ready to faceplant at a moment's notice. I saw a monstrosity grinding down the road, tearing up the asphalt. A damn tank. A turret facing forward, the thing rumbled blindly past, leaving ground-up bits of road in its wake. I wrinkled my nose. Didn't those things have shit tons of computer systems in them? I found it difficult to get a clear look at the vehicle, but the sound of it... I cocked my head, listening. "Rotate the turret, you bastards," I whispered into the rain. "Rotate it!" They never did, and I scrambled up after it passed, standing in the middle of the road. Lightning flashed, illuminating the trees and blackberries crowding the road as I watched the tank's lights recede in the distance. They never saw me, never even noticed. This was worse than I'd thought, and I thought it as bad as things could possibly get. Note to self: Murphy's Law applies to all things. So ends Chapter 4. I hope you come back for Chapter 5.